pleasure and the greatest honor that I go ahead and present all my parts in the Missouri Irish Brigade with the new regimental colors of the 7th Missouri Volunteer Infantry, the 7th Irish.
Gentlemen, hip hip!
Hurrah!
Hip hip!
Hurrah!
Hip hip!
Hurrah! I just wanted to say, you know, we went ahead and put these colors together, boys. Hold on one second. Shoulder, arms,
Thank you.
order, arms, parade, rest. Gentlemen, there was, you know, as you know, I've been working on these colors for a while, but one of the things that I think is most important is to remember who actually marched under those colors. The 7th Missouri Volunteer Infantry. 1,062 men were organized in June 1861. There were 10 companies, as would be fitting of any Union regiment. One of them came from Iowa, 2 came from Illinois, and the 7 rest of them came from Missouri. It represented a good cross-section of Americana, native-born Americans, European immigrants, but by and large they were Irish. They came from Ireland, and let me tell you a little bit about that very sad place and why it's so important to understand why it is that so many Irish volunteered for the Union Army. You see, in Ireland, when you were born, if you were not English, if you were not a member of the landed aristocracy, they referred to themselves as gentlemen. If you were not a member of the Church of England, you were considered nothing, a slave in your own country. No wonder the Irish migrated to America in droves, the hundreds of thousands. And they knew when they got here, with the Civil War starting, they were bound and determined to support the Constitution that allowed them to go ahead and live like men, to make their own homes, that they had to bow to no king. Probably the most important thing that happened throughout their career was what happened when they joined the Army of the Tennessee under Ulysses Grant. That would be the spring 1863. General Grant's grand expedition that year was to seize control of the Mississippi River from the Confederacy. Key to doing that were the rebel fortifications at Vicksburg. He tried several attempts early on, but because of the bayous, swamps, ticks, fleas, snakes, alligators, rebs, he was not successful. In April, he chose a different route. He decided to go down the west bank of the Mississippi, through Louisiana, come up from the south of Vicksburg, and attack it that way. Problem was, he had to go ahead and take his fleet with all the transports that were supplying the Union Army. In order to do that, he had to go ahead and request volunteers. You see, no civilians were going to go ahead and man those transports. The 7th Missouri volunteered 40 men and officers. They sailed in the evening around the bend and came under fire from the siege weapons, the naval guns, the Columbiads, the 40-pounders at Vicksburg. The 7th Missouri was on board the Grand Sidewielder Tigress. She was leading the flotilla down the Mississippi River. As they rounded the bend, she came under fire. And she came directly across the front of Vicksburg she was taking heavy hits, over 300 hits, to the point that the ship sank. So our boys had to transfer to another ship. Ultimately, they joined their comrades in Louisiana south of Vicksburg. After that, they went ahead, the entire army, and crossed the Mississippi River. And then they went ahead and pushed the rebels back near Port Gibson. Ultimately, the rebels took a stand. Small town in Mississippi called Raymond. At that battle, the 7th Missouri took the right of the line. They advanced, the rebels were behind a creek. They advanced on that creek, crossed the creek, and when the 7th Missouri crossed the creek, they noticed that the rebels were on top of a knoll in front of them. They were the 10th, excuse me, the 10th and 30th Tennessee regiments. Now, the Southern regiments tended to be larger in strength than the Union regiments. Nevertheless, with a hearty fall of a lot, the 7th, following these very colors, advanced up that hill. They came under a fierce firefight. They held their own for some time, but ultimately overwhelming numbers were just too much for them and they had to retire. They were part of the 3rd Brigade. There was another Union regiment which came up to support the 32nd Ohio. Together, the two regiments assailed the Tennessee boys on top of the hill and ultimately drove them back. The whole Union Army pushed the Confederate Army back. So, the 7th was able to go ahead and move on to its main objective at that time, which was the capital of Mississippi, Jackson. They took Jackson, then they turned west, and headed towards Vicksburg. When they arrived at Vicksburg with the entire Union Army, one of the things that General Grant wanted to do, because he feared the possibility of reinforcements coming into Vicksburg, was to go ahead and make a general assault on the fortifications there. You see, those were not simple fortifications. They had been prepared for months and months. There were redoubts, redans, there were fletches. There was abattis up there in front to prevent the movement of units in an organized fashion. The ground was cleared for 400 and 500 yards in front, so they had a clear field of fire. May 12th, the time for the attack. Captain Buchanan, who was now commanding the 7th, had his men move up to the staging area. They formed up in column of divisions. They were specifically given the order that no man was to fire without orders. So he gave the order to fix bayonets. They would take the fortifications with cold steel. When the order was given to advance, as the 7th approached the open field, they came under long-range artillery fire from the Confederate defenses. That was shay. As the range grew shorter, it changed to shrapnel. As they got closer, it changed to canister. But in spite of shells, shrapnel, and canister, the hardy lines of the 7th continued to move forward. One of the things that had happened, the color company was placed out in front of the column as they advanced. One man would fall, another man would pick it up, and so on. When one man fell, the next man to pick it up, knowing he was going to be shot, knowing he was going to be killed, picked it up anyway, and for the glory of the regiment carried it forward. When they began approaching the Confederate works within 100 yards, the artillery fire ceased. Now they were faced with heavy infantry fire from muskets from the Louisiana regiment that was holding the actual fortifications. In spite of all this, they continued to move involved. Then they encountered a trench. The trench was 8 feet deep and 14 feet wide. They had brought ladders with them to get across, but the ladders weren't long enough, so they had to go down in and back up. Still, the color guard moved forward with these very colors, and the men in the 7th followed them. When one color bearer would fall, another color bearer would pick it up. Some say these colors actually made it to the very parapet of the Great Redoubt. During that day, 7th Missouri lost killed 6 color bearers. The regiment went on to serve. Ultimately, Vicksburg surrendered due to siege, July 1863. The regiment went on to serve up into enlistment June 1864. After 3 years, arduous service, marked by unsurpassed courage and fortitude, the boys went. You know, it's kind of funny. I can't help but think probably 1,062 odd lads up there looking down on us like that. Twinkle in their eye, smile on their cheek. They say it. Thank you.
Looking at it is a piece of art. It's amazing. Bringing it back to the business of the day.